fabric of regional and global cooperation. This is, in essence, is what we seek to explore through this year's theme, From Fracture to Future. It is both a provocation and an invitation to reflect on Malaysia's evolving role in the world, and to ask with clarity, purpose, and ambition, how do we convert today's global fractures into tomorrow's opportunities? And at this critical juncture, what shape or form should a more confident and outward-looking Malaysia assume? Distinguished guests, friends and colleagues, ISIS Malaysia has, for over 4 decades, remained steadfast in its mission to provide rigorous research, insightful analysis, and well-calibrated policy recommendations on both domestic and international issues of strategic significance. Our work is grounded in the belief that informed, data-driven policy making is the cornerstone of national progress. Our flagship international event, the Asia-Pacific Roundtable, as many of you would know, continues to be impactful, convening distinguished voices from across the globe. This year's edition, held just recently in June, was met with exceptional enthusiasm and attracted robust participation from Malaysia and abroad. Equally significant is our work on domestic policy, which since 2011 has been anchored by the PRAXIS Public Policy Conference. PRAXIS has become a platform for engaged dialogue, for critical reflection, and for forward-looking policy innovation, bringing together stakeholders from government, business, civil society, and academia. This year, we once again welcome an exceptional array of participants to examine pressing policy questions through open and vigorous exchange, with our team having worked tirelessly to ensure that the process remains substantive, focused, and inclusive. In the months preceding this conference, we convened multi-stakeholder roundtables to identify the most salient features and issues shaping our national discourse. Today's conference, in fact, represents a midpoint in the broader praxis cycle. The ideas and insights will be distilled and enriched with analytical rigor by our researchers. The result will be a series of concise, actionable policy briefs aimed at informing decision-making and contributing constructively to the national agenda. Each year, we return to the meaning of the word praxis, the act of translating theory into practice. It is our commitment to transform policy conversations into concrete proposals and to ensure that ideas do not end with mere discussions, but continue through effective implementation. I wish to underscore that the fractures we face are not destined for doom. Malaysia possesses both the agency and the ability to shape the future of regional trade, connectivity, and climate. In this gathering of thoughtful and committed minds lies the collective resolve not only to confront the fractures of our time, but also to chart innovative pathways towards renewal, both at home and across the region. Dear friends, I would like to take a moment to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the PRAXIS team. Their relentless dedication has made today's conference possible, as well as the broader yet year-round work that gives the PRAXIS process its depth and significance. Next, to our esteemed speakers and moderators, thank you for generously agreeing to share your time, your expertise, and insights with us today. By engaging with the critical challenges confronting our nation and region, your contributions will undoubtedly enrich the quality of our discussions. To our partners, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung and Sunway Center for Planetary Health, this conference would not have been possible without your steadfast support. On behalf of the entire ISIS Malaysia team, I extend our heartfelt appreciation for your generous contributions. Your commitment has enabled us to deliver a conference of this caliber, and we look forward to continuing this important work in the months ahead. And to our participants, thank you for your attendance and commitment. I sincerely hope that you will remain with us throughout the day and take part in all the sessions which have been thoughtfully curated. Friends and colleagues, it now gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, who of course doesn't need any introduction, nevertheless, out of sheer formality, Yang Berhormat Senator Tengku Dato Sri Utama Zafrul Aziz, Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry. Tengku, now, since assuming the trade and investment portfolio in 2022, I dare say that you have overseen Malaysia's implementation of the CPTPP and the rollout, more importantly, of the RCEP commitments, launched the new Industrial Master Plan 2030, attracted a record highest ever 379 billion ringgit in approved investments last year. Now, through hard-fought negotiations, you have also clinched an agreement with Washington that pared back the threatened 25% quote-unquote Liberation Day tariff to 19%, while securing pathways for Malaysia's industrial upgrading, technology transfer, and a deeper integration into critical supply chains. This morning's keynote, stocktake of ASEAN deliverables and Malaysia's trade positioning, I would expect that you will, hopefully, expound on some of these challenges, as well as on Malaysia's ASEAN chairmanship. I believe that you will also outline our leadership situates within today's increasingly complex trade landscape and how Malaysia can contribute to shaping the region's future trajectory. We were just walking along just now and I mentioned to YB Tengku Zafrul about this big morning's caffeine-laden announcement by Trump for the 100% tariff on semiconductors. I'm sure you can handle that later during Q&A. So, just a short note, once the address concludes, we will open the floor for a brief moderated dialogue. Brief because Tengku Zafrul has to rush to Parliament to continue his duties of state. In keeping with the spirit of praxis, I hope this exchange will help bridge the gap between policy and practice and between strategic ambition and lived reality. And on that note, I have the single honor, double privilege of calling on Yang Berhormat Tengku Zafrul to deliver his keynote.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Muhammad Faiz, Chairman of ISIS. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ms. Natalie Rosman, Tan Sri Professor Dr. Jamila Mahmud, and the rest of you who are here, Your Excellencies, esteemed board members of ISIS, distinguished speakers, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. So, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam Malaysia Madani, and a very good morning. I want to begin by congratulating the Institute of Strategic and International Studies, ISIS, on its success in organizing PRAXIS 2025, and of course with the collaboration with its esteemed partners. I'll keep my speech short so that we can have a more interactive session. I know Professor Faiz has got a lot of questions. And also, as what Professor Faiz said, I have to rush to Parliament because at 10:15, basically, I think my session starts, where we have the weekly minister question time. And Trump chose the wrong day to announce that 100%. So I'll have to try and navigate that in Parliament today. But anyway, it is a pleasure to be invited once again to deliver the keynote address at this flagship conference on trade, climate change, and connectivity. In the year that has passed since my last keynote, the world, I think, as what Professor Faiz said, to put it mildly, has evolved in many ways, so making PRAXIS even more relevant and truly indispensable. So today's global environment is increasingly volatile. Even that, I think, is an understatement. And from rising tariffs and tech controls to the fragmentation of international cooperation, we are witnessing a fundamental reshaping of the global economic order. So change that once unfolded maybe every 10 years, over a decade, now takes place in a matter of weeks. And if you follow Trump's announcements, it can be a matter of days. So at PRAXIS 2024, I highlighted the government's effort to implement holistic policies for a better tomorrow, ranging from the Madani Economy Framework to the new Industrial Master Plan. We have the National Energy Transition Roadmap, and these initiatives were conceived to equip Malaysia to face precisely the kinds of disruptions we are seeing today. And then since then, the urgency to build national resilience and promote sustainable development has only grown more acute. So PRAXIS 2025, the theme today, from fracture to future, really captures the world we live in. Yes, I think we face fractures, but fracture is not a fate. It's not fate. As a maturing industrial economy, Malaysia has the agency to chart a course towards a high-growth nation that is stable and inclusive, as outlined by the Madani Economy Framework. So that journey begins with reinforcing our fundamentals, as well as accelerating our green and digital transitions. Additionally, tactful diplomacy, embracing regional cooperation, and forging partnerships must be source of strength. So what I propose today is to give a short stocktake on what we've accomplished as ASEAN Chair, and based on those terms, with a view of strengthening Malaysia's trade and investment position. So distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Malaysia's ASEAN Chairmanship in 2025 exemplifies our commitment to advancing regional cooperation, especially in a time of geo-economic flux. We must remember, in today's fractured world, geo-economics is no longer optional, it is destiny. For Malaysia and ASEAN, the challenge is to turn our geography into strategy, our neutrality into strength, and our openness into opportunity. Against that complex backdrop, so in May this year, we formalized a renewed trajectory through the ASEAN Vision 2045 and the ASEAN Economic Community Strategic Plan 2026-2030. And both these documents send a clear message that deeper regional integration, and particularly in trade and connectivity, is our best buffer against global uncertainty. So despite an extensive network of FTAs, intra-trade, especially for intra-ASEAN trade, still makes up less than 25% of the regional total trade, a figure that has stagnated over the past decade. So to reverse this, Malaysia has tabled 18 PEDs, 18 Priority Economic Deliverables, for our chairmanship this year. I'm pleased to report that more than half of our trade-related targets have already been met. We have concluded negotiations to upgrade the ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement, ATIGA, and the ASEAN-China Free Trade Agreement. And these upgraded FTAs, expected to be signed in October, to expand the cooperation into new areas such as services, e-commerce, and SMEs. We also focused on strengthening the implementation and utilization of agreements such as RCEP, and the establishment of the RCEP support unit at the ASEAN Secretariat was only the start. So of course, much more must be done, especially empowering SMEs to take full advantage of agreements such as RCEP. And the upcoming ASEAN Digital Economy Framework Agreement, or DEFA, is another major priority, with ASEAN's digital economy projected to reach $2 trillion by 2030. A comprehensive regional framework for data flows, paperless trading, e-commerce, and cybersecurity is timely. But regional integration must go beyond the traditional concepts of trade and investment. So in today's context, economic security is just as vital as efficiency. Highly interconnected supply chains are increasingly vulnerable to disruption, whether due to pandemics, natural disasters, or geopolitical tensions. So to address this, Malaysia has proposed the ASEAN Framework on Integrated Semiconductor Supply Chain. This is aimed at positioning Southeast Asia as a united production base for microchip design, manufacturing, packaging, and distribution. So this vision complements bilateral efforts. Of course, we have the JSEZ, for example, that underscores the need for ASEAN member states to collaborate, if possible not to compete, in attracting FDIs. And trade diversification remains a key focus. This year, we successfully convened not only the now established ASEAN GCC Summit, but also the first ever ASEAN GCC China Summit, resulting in a joint declaration on economic cooperation. This could serve as a springboard for a future ASEAN GCC free trade agreement with strong potentials in sectors such as renewable energy, halal, and probably also Islamic finance. So distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, our efforts at the regional level in ASEAN mirror our national economic priorities. Malaysia remains steadfast in supporting an open, transparent, and rules-based global trade order. We have signed and implemented 9 bilateral and 9 regional FTAs, including, of course, what Professor Faiz mentioned just now, RCEP, CPTPP, 2 of the world's largest trade agreements. And there's ongoing negotiations with the EU, GCC, as well as South Korea. We'll also expand this list. In parallel, we have stepped up our economic diplomacy efforts as a key pillar of Malaysia's international engagement. Our objective is clear: to amplify Malaysia's voice as a principled, constructive middle power, and to actively shape conversations on global trade, development, and equity. This includes pursuing meaningful engagement with both established and emerging economies through multilateral, regional, and plurilateral platforms. So in this regard, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's recent visit, for example, to Rio, Professor Faiz was there as well for the BRIC summit, marked a significant milestone. Malaysia was honored to be invited as one of the new partner countries of BRICS, a recognition of our strategic value to the evolving Global South narrative. And at the business forum, this is at the BRICS Business Forum, the Prime Minister made a strong call for closer institutional linkages between BRICS and ASEAN, highlighting the shared ambition of both groupings, not to disrupt the global order, but to rebalance it. Our engagement with BRICS is forward-looking rather than ideological, driven by the practical necessity of needing to diversify our relationship on all fronts. So we must realize that Malaysia is hoping to demonstrate that neutrality is about friendship with all rather than picking sides. As global economic governance becomes more contested, Malaysia's BRICS engagement offers new opportunities to diversify partnerships, promote technology transfer, and enhance connectivity with fast-growing economies in Latin America, in Africa, and even in Central Asia. And our participation in BRICS complements our existing alliances and reinforces our belief that constructive engagement with all major economic centers, North and South, is essential to national resilience. And recent bilateral milestones further illustrate our strategic outreach. In August 2024, Malaysia and India elevated ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership, enhancing cooperations in science and technology, fintech, and education. And just last November, Malaysia and Brazil signed 2 MOUs to deepen collaboration in semiconductors, highlighting both countries' ambitions to build industrial competitiveness and advance South-South cooperation. Through it all, Malaysia remains committed to a policy of economic non-alignment. Both the United States and China are vital partners to us, of course. It is not in our interest to choose between them or even decouple from either. And our principle is clear: engage all economies, big and small, North and South, but based on mutual respect, mutually beneficial interests, and long-term resilience. So our neutrality is actually our strength, and we must preserve it to our utmost ability. So distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have achieved much and will continue to achieve a lot more in terms of the economic pillar for ASEAN and the reform plans for Malaysia. But now is not the time for either to rest. Yeah? The dispute between Thailand and Cambodia shows a clear message. Our region must never take peace and stability it has enjoyed for the last couple of decades for granted. Malaysia, under the courageous leadership of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, whose efforts to maintain peace and stability in our region are bearing fruit and are being recognized near and far. And we, of course, do all it can within the framework of ASEAN. And as chair of ASEAN, we have a duty to ensure the ceasefire holds and that a more lasting, just resolution can be achieved. Separately, the Liberation Day tariffs have been a tough challenge to ASEAN's unity and coherence. I would argue that while we have ended up with several different rates within ASEAN, ASEAN has held the line in the sense that we prioritize negotiations rather than confrontation. The non-retaliatory approach was strongly pushed by Malaysia and adopted by our ASEAN colleagues. Of course, the negotiations were not easy, and I believe we got the best possible deal we could for Malaysia, one which, while addressing key concerns in US-Malaysia bilateral trade, still upheld our key national interests and red lines. It is true there is still much uncertainty ahead, and we just heard an announcement by President Trump early this morning. So will the, for example, be there sector-specific tariffs, and then will our region need to reckon with other trading partners making demands? So clarity on arguably the most important factor of them all. So US and China is scarce and may elude us for a generation. So we have to be ready for that. So we are still in uncharted waters, but the most important point is that we are not facing this with a fractured national or regional stand. Without in any way claiming these things to be a silver bullet, I would like to suggest 3 points that we can and ought to keep before us moving forward as ASEAN. First, we need to double down on the ASEAN way. Our principles of non-alignment and a willingness to dialogue with all like-minded partners has value. It has remained intact in the face of the challenges of Liberation Day and arguably delivered what we as a region needed, where and when it mattered. Second, the process of diversification and economic integration must continue. The former, because while the American market remains crucial, it is undoubtedly going through a phase where rules-based trading is becoming less clear, causing a lot of uncertainty, possibly for a generation as well. The latter, because when all is said and done, a 680 million strong ASEAN market is a valuable resource to tide us over during this fractured era. The initiative I mentioned Artiga upgrade, the DEFA, and also the various PEDs, are just the most obvious of limitless opportunities. For instance, talent development on a regional scale is also something we can and ought to explore. Finally, reform must continue, both nationally and on the ASEAN level. Like it or not, Liberation Day has raised more uncomfortable questions about our economic models. While the best change is not necessarily the most drastic, we may need to have deep, frank conversations on where we are going and what we need to do. Nationally, it is now more crucial to ensure the success of reform plans like the Industrial Master Plan, as well as the 13th Malaysia Plan, which focuses on transformative nationwide progress. So the success of these policies will help the regional conversations, of course, how we as ASEAN can build stronger institutions and more connected economies, move not from a place of suspicion, but from one of strength and confidence. So it is for Malaysia, so it is for ASEAN. There is no shortage of voices willing to write off either with every twist or turn, but we thus far have endured, and I'm confident that we will do so. So distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the world around us is shifting, not with the gentle rhythms of yesterday, but with the tremors of a new age. Fault lines of geopolitics, technology, and trade have cracked the old certainties. But from these fractures, we must summon not fear, but foresight and some degree of faith in ourselves. Nations are not built in stillness, but are forged in flux. The sharpest swords are forged in the hottest fires. And it is in these moments of dislocation that the arc of our future is drawn, not by fate, but by the choices we make today. So Malaysia will not drift aimlessly in this turbulent tide. We will anchor ourselves to our principles, chart a course through complexity, and embrace the boldness required to lead. So from fractured supply chains, we build resilient ecosystem. From economic uncertainty, we will craft enduring partnerships. And from the fragmentation of the world, we will offer Malaysia as a bridge of stability, trust, and purpose. So let us not speak of fracture as an end, but as a beginning, a golden opportunity for renewal and reform. The global moment is precarious, but not hopeless. It is precisely through proactive leadership, both nationally and regionally, that we can build the resilience needed to weather current and future shocks. Malaysia's ASEAN chairmanship is grounded on this ethos. Our PEDs reflect our commitment to sustainability, inclusiveness, and long-term stability. This is how we move from fracture to future. Let history one day say, in an age of division, Malaysia chose to unite. In a time of doubt, we chose to act. And in the face of fracture, we forged our future. So let me end with the enduring wisdom of Tengku Abdul Rahman, father of our nation. Kunci kepada kemajuan dan kesejahteraan tidak terletak pada kepuasan menikmati apa yang telah dicapai, tetapi pada keazaman yang utuh untuk melakukan yang lebih daripada itu pada masa hadapan, which translates to the key to progress and prosperity doesn't rely on contentment with what has been achieved, but on a steadfast resolve to strive for more in the days ahead. So I wish you a productive and thought-provoking conference and look forward to the robust discussions ahead. So wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
I've just been told that we have only hit 8 minutes. Are you sure that the time is correct?
20 minutes.
We have 20 minutes, thank goodness. No, that was a really wonderful speech. Indeed, the sharpest swords are forged in the hottest fires. Yeah, that's a great one. You're preparing for your campaign speech, yeah?
When is the election?
Yes, well, it's coming soon. Thank you. We have 20 minutes. We'll try to make the most of it. I have got a lot of questions that won't be fair if I want to be monopolizing that. I just want to start with the first one, which I hope that Tengku has already anticipated, the question and the answer. You mentioned about the 100% tariffs. No, I just want to know two things, I think for the benefit of us. In what way will it quantitatively affect our GDP projections, number one, and who will be and what will be the sectors most affected? Tengku, please.
Yeah, this morning when I woke up, I got many messages from our media office in Washington and from my colleagues, and also from the industry about the statement made by President Trump. I think I'm sure everyone in this room is aware that President Trump has announced that he plans to impose a 100% tariff on semiconductors. The recently concluded negotiations with the US, between Malaysia and the US, and of course the other countries as well, semiconductor was excluded. So that 19% that Malaysia achieved during our negotiations with the US excluded semiconductor, because semiconductor is seen as economic security, and under the Security Act, under Section 232, they are doing investigation. They have given a timeline until end of December, and obviously that's too long for President Trump. So what has happened is that he said within a week we will know more details, and I've reached out to my counterpart in the US as well. And for Malaysia, the impact could be depending on the details of that announcement. But from what we have gathered, the United States wants to ensure that as many companies who are operating outside the US comes back to the US when it comes to semiconductor, right? And I think he made that announcement when Tim Cook was there as well. You know, Apple has committed to bring back some operations into the US. So for Malaysia, we export to the US with about 200 billion ringgit. In fact, US is our largest export market, second is China. And out of that 200 billion ringgit, 60% is E&E, yeah? And out of that 60% E&E, 58% is semiconductor. So it's a meaningful size, yeah? 58% of 60% out of that 200 billion. And another interesting fact is that out of that 68% or all the semiconductor exports, 65% of semiconductor exports to the US are from the United States, are from companies who are US companies based in Malaysia. So, of course, one of the things that was mentioned by Trump is that if you move some part of your business or announce new investment into the US, then you may be excluded. So that 65% that exports to US, who are US companies, we're not sure. Some of them have announced already, so they may be excluded. But having said that, Bank Negara just revised their GDP economic forecast between 4 to 4.8% growth for this year. And it factored in the possibilities of tariff between 15 to 25. So we are still within that range. So that is the potential impact. And even as a total exports, E&E is still a major export for Malaysia, not just to the US, but to all other countries. Because out of our total exports, close to 42% of our export is in the E&E sector. So it's a very large. And if you look at our exports today, 80% of our exports is from the manufacturing sector. Only 20% is not in the manufacturing sector. So it is important, and our concern will be the entire supply chain that supports the companies that are exporting to the US. So there's a first degree impact, there's a second and third degree impact as well. So that, I think we're working with Bank Negara to understand the total impact from the recent announcement.
Thank you, thank you. I think we have a couple of questions. Would you care to raise your hand so that we can pick up your question?
Okay, well, that's good, thank you.
Where? Right at the far left, yes. Could you pass the microphone? Thank you, yes.
Good morning. My name is Andrew Koo, practicing lawyer here in Kuala Lumpur. Senator, in response to your very good speech, which I would sort of characterize as facing fracture with faith and fortitude, my question is about our approach to BRICS. I know you tried to say that we are trying to be inclusive and non-divisive and things like that. But given the current situation, given the current mood in Washington, isn't there a concern, a deep concern, that our approach to BRICS will be viewed negatively and it might invite retaliatory tariffs of some sort? And if so, what is our plan B? Thank you.
I think you can take that.
Yeah, no problem. So during our negotiations with the US, never once that our counterparts or even the chief negotiator from the US side or USTR, Jamison Greer, or even our Latnik, the Secretary of Commerce, have ever stated their concern about us being involved in BRICS. And as you know, our ASEAN neighbors, Indonesia is already a member of BRICS, Thailand is applying, Vietnam is applying, they are partners as well of BRICS. Then we have other countries, UAE, they're all friends to the US. Because we need to be consistent when we explain to them if they ask. Because, as I mentioned, we have restarted the negotiations with EU. We have various other multilateral and bilateral FTAs. We have 18 multilateral and bilateral FTAs with many other countries, many other economic blocs. We've just started our first round of discussions with GCC as well, Malaysia GCC and ASEAN GCC also we are going to start, but start with Malaysia GCC first. So we have to be consistent. if we just talk to BRICS and not everyone else, then I think that will be an issue. For now, engaging BRICS, and as you know, there's no formal agreements of any economic cooperation, there's no FTAs, I think it's like APEC, right? You know, loose, we are also, of course, a member of APEC as well, and the US is also there, right? So at the moment, it's a non-issue. There's never been raised. So to me, the only time that Trump raised about BRICS is when BRIC member countries talk about, you know, moving away from dollar or de-dollarization. That, I think, is sensitive to Trump, right?
Thank you. I think that there's another question coming in from there. I think I saw your hand first earlier. Sorry, right at the back. Yes, yes.
A very good morning, sir. I'm Juwita Mohammed, former ISIS researcher. I know that it's not easy to negotiate with the US, but I was just wondering, did we give in too much, looking at our commitments on purchasing of Boeing, coal purchases, telecommunications, and also the exemptions of requirements for social media platforms as well as data centers in contributing to state government. So I just wanted to ask for your take on this. Thank you.
Perhaps we can take another question before we go on. Yes, Astro.
So I'm going to relieve you of a question about President Trump because he has a term, but climate change does not. As Malaysia works to attract foreign investment and strengthen its position in ASEAN supply chains, how is the ministry ensuring that trade and investment do not become accelerators of climate change and biodiversity loss and pollution? Because you and I know and have worked through this, these factors are now clearly linked to rising risks of infectious diseases and possibly future pandemics and overall security in the region. And it can, as you also remember, when we work together, disrupt economies and so forth. So what safeguards, incentives, and governance mechanisms are being implemented to ensure that economic growth does not come at the cost of the planet's and humans' well-being? And how is Malaysia embedding the principles of climate resilience, social equity and health protection into trade agreements, industrial policies, foreign investor frameworks to build a future-ready, sustainable economy for ASEAN?
Thank you, thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Zafrul. Yes. So I'll answer the first one first. First of all, during the negotiation, there's 6 chapters. Chapter 1 is tariff. As you know, we have reduced 98% of tariff or go to zero, some of them. And then there were other non-tariff barriers that I think you mentioned about, and also there's procurement. The non-tariff barriers and procurement are the 2 areas which you mentioned. I'll talk about the so-called, where you said that we are, giving in to, giving up collection for the Universal Services Provider Fund for MCMC. This is the USP fund where we're going to charge 6% of the revenue that's been collected by the data centers, for example, right? So when you negotiate with the US, they will ask you, why are you the only country in the world doing this? We say that, oh, this is for fund the digital divide in Malaysia. Whose responsibility is it? Is it the MCMC responsibility or is it the Ministry of Finance government? Don't you have a consolidated fund? Why can't you do it via digital sales tax? Other countries do it via digital sales tax. So you can still achieve the same objective. Why does it have to go to an MCMC fund, right? So for us, we didn't give up anything. MOF, the government can still support digital divide, narrow the digital divide by collecting through digital sales tax. And even digital sales tax, what was their request? Their request is make sure that we do not discriminate against the US companies by law and by fact. By law is not enough because by law we can give exceptions. That's why it has to be by law and by fact. So I think that is not an issue. for Malaysia, right? Of course, you have to look at the total context. I've just told you how big the export is, etc., and must be about where we are versus our neighbors. You asked me about the procurement. When was the announcement of Boeing made? It was done in March. When was Liberation Day? It was in April. It's something that Malaysia Aviation Group has planned for months, for years even. So no tariff or tariff or no tariff, it was a decision made based on business considerations. Tourism numbers are going up past the COVID era, you know, and you are competing. You got Asia, you got Batik Air, you got Singapore, so you need to build up your fleet. We announced 30 in March with an optional 30. What do you announce in our trade negotiation? Exactly the same thing. Again, what is the main issue when it comes to procurement? It's because of our trade deficit. What's our trade deficit with the US? $25 billion US. Is it big? Relatively, yes, given we are top 15 trade countries with the largest trade surplus with the US. So how do we address that concern? Do we get government to spend? No. Does any of the procurement numbers result in increase in deficit? Zero. Any impact on the fiscal position of the country? Zero. Why? Because one is Malaysia Airlines. Second, we went to the chambers, the US chambers. We said to the US chambers and to other companies in the US, based in Malaysia, what are your budget for next year? And out of your budget for next year, how many % of that budget is procurement that you need to do anyway in the US? What's our biggest import from the US today? E&E as well, because it comes in here, we do some value add, and we send it back. So again, does it impact the government, the taxpayers' money? No. Does it impact the companies? No, because it's already planned. So we go to CMOF, Khazanah, EPF. Can you talk to your investee companies? What are their plans going forward that has procurement with the US companies? So Tenaga say, I'm buying this, Telecom say, I'm buying that, Petronas, I'm buying this, LNG. Is it something that they will do if there is no tariff? Yes. Even if tariff is zero, they're still doing it. So why is that an issue? To me, it's not. Of course, my counterpart said, what's new? You're not announcing anything new. I said, no, if the objective is to reduce trade deficit, doesn't this reduce your trade deficit? And having said that, our trade deficit 4 years ago was 40 billion US. It's now 25 billion US. It is going down. So in negotiations, we must understand what the other party wants. And we also must understand what the other party is concerned about, right? I mean, I can be open here because there are many of you in this room also disagree with some of the policy of the government. For example, excise duties on cars. We have excise duties on only 3 sectors: alcohol, tobacco, and cars. And you know how sensitive Trump is to cars. He said, why are you having excise duties on cars? We all know why. But do we stand firm? We stood firm. On government procurement, did we stood firm? We stood firm. On Bumiputera issue, did we stood firm? We stood firm. On the equity interest on foreign shareholding on strategic sectors, did we stood firm? Did we stood firm? And did you know that out of all the tariff lines, the 11,400 tariff lines, we only give 0 to 60% of that tariff lines. So it is a negotiation where it has to be win-win. But at the same time, it is not a free trade agreement kind of negotiation done in 3 months, right? It is unilateral, whatever you say. It is not bilateral. But at the same time, we got to be realistic. You know, US is our largest export market, second largest trading partner, largest FDI into Malaysia by far, right? So we need to take into consideration just the E&E sector alone. If I just say, look, I don't want to negotiate anything with you, 100,000 jobs, 5% of GDP. So we need to take into context. And you know, I know there's a lot of ambassadors here. You know, I'll let you all decide. You know, we are going out with our joint statement. You can make comparison because every country is unique in its strength with the US and, of course, weaknesses as well. So that has to be taken into context. Things have to be looked at holistically. It is not ideal, but there are also opportunities in this discussion. But we can't just rely on US at the end of the day. What's the total trade with the US? It's 15%. Right? 85% is not with US. This is Malaysia. Even ASEAN trades with the US 15%. You know, so we need to strengthen and diversify our markets. But we, as a country as well, the companies in Malaysia must continue to invest to ensure that they remain competitive. Okay, now Aziz Jamila's answer.
I was going to say you still have 3 to 4 minutes.
I got
Injury
3
time.
minutes. Yeah, injury time. Sorry, I got carried away. I have to be in Parliament at 10 for the minister question time. I think my phone is ringing already. Okay, Aziz Jamila, I think it's definitely important. Sustainability is important, but the problem with focusing on sustainability only without looking at the impact when we focus on sustainability is to ensure that that sustainability agenda comes with inclusivity. The reason why I say this is because sustainability comes at a certain price for now, right? As technology develops, as companies investing in sustainability has scale, then the cost will go down. There is a cost, but who's going to bear that cost? It's always the government, unless of course, we can pass through to the consumers and to the rakyat, and if that happens, I won't be sitting here anymore. So we need to actually time it in a way. So we need a plan, we need a roadmap, we need to ensure that those targets are met within that roadmap. For example, for industries, when it comes to carbon emissions, we have a target for certain industries. And the biggest carbon emitter today in the manufacturing sector, for example, is steel and cement. So we're talking to the Ministry of Finance, and the Prime Minister has already announced that next year we'll start imposing carbon tax. So then at least you level the playing field. Or else those companies that are involved in the steel sector, why would they invest in CCUS, for example? Why would they invest from a blast furnace to electricity steel plant when they will then compete in a way unfairly, because let's say construction company will buy from the cheapest steel maker. They don't care whether you're green steel or not. So if you have carbon tax, and obviously that will equalize it a bit. So similarly for green energy, solar today is not the solar of yesterday in terms of pricing, right? So that I think moved, but as you know, solar is a peak plant. It's not a base load. How many hours a day do you have sun? So this is where battery energy storage system is important to complement, and of course hydro. But hydro, Sarawak has abundance of that. We're talking about Sarawak, Peninsular Malaysia. So my point is, there are 3 things we need to do on sustainability. One is to get companies to be aware first, capacity building. It's not just about financial, because like it or not, sustainability is going to be key for our exporters. To get market access, there are many countries, except for maybe one that has pulled out from Paris Agreement, are looking at ensuring that, so companies not. Secondly, we need to support the SMEs. This is where capacity building again is important, because when we talk to multinational, palm oil industry, for example, they are ready, but the smallholders are not, right? So how do we support the smallholders? How do we support the SMEs in the manufacturing sector? And finally, I think the government intervention is key, right? In the forms, because of the fiscal constraints of Malaysia, we need to do it gradually because we can't pass the cost through consumers, because industries will, and so we need to ensure that we create the right ecosystem where companies are encouraged to, right? And then in tandem with the development of technology can assist that. We have targets, that's why for the automotive industry, logistics sector is also a big carbon emitter outside the manufacturing sector. So the government has started to do this, but the problem is we are, sitting on the accelerator for both. Usually when you hit accelerator for green energy, you pull the brake on, fuel subsidy. So because no fuel subsidy means the price goes up, then the substitute becomes more attractive. But right now, the fuel price is, very low. So the incentive to move away from ICE combustion engines, for example, not as great as maybe other countries. But again, so this is where the transition has to happen slowly. But surely we need to make sure that we fulfill the commitment that we have to be net zero by as early as 2050. So thank you.
So on that enlightening and promising note, we draw to a close for this morning's session. Let's give our hand to Tengku Zafrul. Thank you very much.
Thank you, YB Tengku Zafrul and Datuk Faiz for their insightful remarks. Once again, let's give a big round of applause to YB Tengku Zafrul and Datuk Faiz. everyone. We will now take a quick 20-minute break, and session 1 will commence at 10:15 a.m. sharp. Refreshments are ready at the foyer outside the ballroom. Don't forget to interact with our content panels, and do grab copies of our latest publications covering various topics, including discussions from last year's PRAXIS. Feel free to scan the QR codes displayed on the LED screens to explore the papers related to session 1. We look forward to welcoming you back in the